Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Dominic Hartz. I'm the CTO at Interlay, and I have co-founded the company together with Alexei about 2.5 years ago. Today I'm going to talk about secure bridges for DeFi. It's been a real honor to be here, and I apologize for not making this in person or making it live. I'm unfortunately traveling right now, so I have to record this presentation in advance. For that, I apologize, but then in the end, you're going to get my contact details on Twitter and Telegram and email. So if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me on those. All right. So why are we talking today? So this is an event focused on Web3 and Fintech. And I want to talk about secure bridges for DeFi. And why do we need bridges and what are those specifically? So if you look at kind of the history of blockchains, that's still very recent. It's like 2009, you got Bitcoin starting, then 2014, Ethereum came around as the next big iteration. Obviously, there were other chains before that. And in 2017, with the ICO boom, there also came increased funding of new L1 platforms. And then nowadays, today, you see a lot of traction of new platforms. So you have Solana being quite active, you have Avalanche gaining some tractions, Cosmos, especially if you think about Terra, and the Polka ecosystem actually gaining some traction, and also the L2 platforms that were pretty much early range of 2017. Now finally get some real traction and they got some real technology that people can actually use. So when we as builders, and I'm very much a builder, my background is in computer science, distributed systems. When we build blockchains and when we build new systems, we very often make trade-offs. So think about it like how if you only have one very type of car, right? That would be quite limited. You could drive that car around, but maybe if you want to go to a mountain road, that might be quite difficult. Or if you want to go very fast, if you just do like one singular type of car, it would be very difficult. So nowadays, obviously, you get like thousands of different types of brands of cars. And the same is somewhat true with blockchain development, because ultimately you get these different chains that are good for different things. So Bitcoin started out as a peer-to-peer money system. If you look at the original white paper, started out with exactly that, and now it's kind of more the store of value. It's still kind of reasonably expensive to make transactions, but you can't really do a lot of things outside of transactions because contracts are very limited. Ethereum, on the other hand, is great for general smart contracts, and this is where DeFi really started to explode, right? You could build these lending protocols, you could build stable coins, you could build AMMs, but then it's a general platform. Ethereum is executed by thousands of machines worldwide, but at the same time, it's very inefficient, which makes it expensive. And I listed here down there a lot of other trade-offs that are great. Zcash and Monero for their privacy, but then again, smart contracts, Solana, very fast execution, makes some trade-offs in terms of who can become a validator miner set, near the sharded system, and we got Polkadot and Cosmos as like new systems that might seem somewhat similar, and then we have all the L2 solutions. And as we see like the entirety of the ecosystem grow, you can see more diversification and specializations of different blockchains. So what are the open problems that we are facing when we're designing these kind of systems? In essence, you can see that once you go multi-chain, you get some issues with incompatible wallet standards, being cross-chain communication being a problem because it's kind of hard to do, and I'm going to go into more detail on that, and liquidity becoming distributed across protocols and across chains, which reduces capital and reduces capital efficiency. But then on the other hand, bridges are great because now you get all these application-specific blockchains that are really tailored to different use cases, and they can all integrate with each other. There's also talk about DeFi logos within Ethereum, but then now you get DeFi logos across like ecosystems, and you can build entirely new things that were pretty unimaginable before. Let's get into some numbers and let's get into more details on this new ecosystem. And really what I'm trying to do here is to convince you that this is an important problem and give some outlook and how you can contribute to it. If you look at bridging away from Ethereum today, you have almost $25 billion being bridged over from Ethereum to other chains in a wide range of different bridges. Those include L1 and L2 bridges, and you can on June Analytics is a great platform. You can check that out, and it gets like live updated. Very similar, one of the OG chains or the OG chain, Bitcoin. Bitcoin now lives, a lot of Bitcoin live on Ethereum, over 300,000 or 333,000 at the time of this very presentation. Again, check out the June Analytics board if you want to see more details. Yeah, that's ultimately, it's a lot of money basically being bridged over. And a couple of months ago, this blog post came out that basically gave a very good intro and overview of the current ecosystem of bridges. And you can see like the big smart contract chains here in the middle, or at least some of them, Cosmos, Ethereum, Polkadot, and the top Solana, Tezos, Near, and so on and so forth, and how they're connected with each other. And this is just really like a snapshot glimpse at the current system of blockchains and all the different bridges that exist out there, and there's a lot more to it. So apparently there's a lot of interest in building these bridges. But then what is a bridge actually? So bridge, if you want to do like a high level definition at this abstract level, it's a system that transfers information between two or more blockchains. So you can think about it like a source chain and a destination chain. That information could be, for example, an asset. So if our source chain is Bitcoin and our destination chain would be Ethereum, and the information would be what happens to that one Bitcoin, and then you have wrap BTC. So let's say we lock on Bitcoin, and we transfer that information that the Bitcoin is now locked onto Ethereum, and we call that a transaction inclusion proof, and basically say, oh, now we have a wrap Bitcoin on Ethereum, and we can use it as if we were using Bitcoin on the Bitcoin chain, but now we can do it on Ethereum. Just kind of for completeness sake, there's a lot more to it, to bridges and cross-chain communication in particular. So this is a formal definition that I won't read out loud, but I can highly recommend reading Alexis' paper on cross-chain communication that's been accepted at Financial Crypto, which is one of the top conferences in the entirety of the blockchain space, and they really go into details a lot around how to define it and where the different design trade-offs actually lie. If we think about cross-chain communication and bridges as a system, then bridges really have three main components. Keep in mind, I'm keeping this extremely general right now, just because there's so many different designs, but it will lead to a better understanding how you can reason about bridges and their security later on. So typically you have some sort of relay functionality. This serves some sort of point of truth where an oracle or a validator or a relayer report the source of truth to the destination chain. So when we talked about this part here, where I was proving that a Bitcoin had been locked on the Bitcoin source chain, I could do that in different ways. I could do that by having a trusted oracle, but just saying, okay, if this entity organization says, oh yeah, Bitcoin has actually been locked, I'm trusting that. Or it could be a validator. So for example, maybe some consensus participants in Bitcoin could report that state, or we do it with an independent relayer, and that relayer could basically be a light node in the sense of replicating Bitcoin's consensus on top of Ethereum, which was actually one of the first things that were built on Ethereum. It's called a BTC relay. The consensus, at the very least, you got to trust the consensus on both the source and the destination chain, just because those are the two systems that you really trust with information, right? If you can't trust the consensus of one of the chains, there's no point really in bridging things over. And sometimes you get some sort of consensus between the relayers or the what I'm going to talk about next, the custodian signers, that these people that relay information over, they sometimes have an additional consensus protocol. And then that brings us to the last group of people. Those are the custodian signers. Those are essentially the ones that keep information or assets in custody and transfer information and assets. I use assets here only in the parentheses, but really in the majority of cases, what we're interested in is transferring assets over and their representation. But generally, you could obviously think about more general information as well. And there's protocols, in particular, more advanced things like IBC or XCM that are more general, where you can include additional information. Good. Now, what about security? Why is this talk even named Secure DeFi Bridges? Isn't that all great? We got systems. It has a bit of complexity. But why do we talk about security? Well, turns out cross-chain communication is actually really difficult to do. And to do it in a secure way is very hard. This year already, like some of the biggest DeFi hacks ever, 320 million in the wormhole, Solana bridge, then the Poly network bridge, 600 million, then even a little bit unsuspecting Bitcoin, the specialized Badger DAO, suffering like a front-end exploit, something that was also quite novel and concerning. And then just very recently wrote in another $600 million in their CrossChain bridge being at risk, or funds being lost essentially. So, why does this happen? Let's talk a little bit about the design space of cross-chain bridges. We essentially have, if you will, like 4 different levels of security design of cross-chain bridges. We have the most trustless level, in where we essentially only trust the validator set or the miners of the 2 blockchains, and we assume that there's one online relayer that syncs the 2 chains. We basically we implement every aspect of the bridge as smart contracts on 2 chains, and the smart contracts are able to verify the state of the other chain, and they're able to send messages, and the messages that are basically sent, they're relayed by this relayer. But the relayer is completely untrusted, so the entire verification happens inside of the smart contracts. One level lower are insured bridges. There we can't lock assets, or we don't lock assets on one chain or on both chains, but we have to rely on custodians. So the custodians take on assets. For example, on Bitcoin would be like somebody taking on Bitcoin into custody, but then we can require that those custodians are collateralized. This is a higher trust assumption because now you get like economic security, where you rely on the fact that the collateral that the custodian must provide must always strictly be higher than the assets that a custodian has access over. A level lower are so-called bonded bridges. It's a bit similar as insured in the sense that you get custodians that have to lock some sort of tokens, but typically this is done where they have to lock up some sort of fixed amount of tokens, and it's also unrelated to the funds that they have under management. And very typical is also those bonded funds are not used to reimburse users, whereas if it's insured, then if custodians lose funds, then this collateral will be used to reimburse users. And then the very very last category is trusted. Custodian have full control over assets. They can do anything, and there's at least in terms of code, in terms of trustless verification, there's no repercussions against them. And well, today the majority of the protocols that we have are in the trusted category. Some are in the bonded, very few are insured, and there's even fewer that are trustless. Now, why are we there? Right? We want to be here. We want to be having mostly trustless and insured bridges. What are the you know what are the practical implementations right now? Right. So if we talk about Bitcoin bridges on Ethereum, for example, we have about $40 million being bridged over in insured bridges versus 15 billion being in trusted bridges. So there's a lot of money at risk basically in these trusted bridges. Also, when we talk about Ethereum to other chain bridges, then like the vast majority is over trusted setups or setups where funds can be locked in a very long time. So right now we live in this time of trusted bridges, and I personally think, most we as Interlay as a company think that should be changed. But there's a reason why people build trusted bridges. There's some practical issues. I won't go into too much detail here, but some things are just impossible to build. So for example, on Bitcoin, you can't verify state of another chain. So it's really hard to actually build fully trustless, or it's pretty much impossible to build fully trustless bridges with Bitcoin. So you have to do insured bridges. Some of the things are just technical complexity of two bridges. It's already hard to build a DeFi protocol correct and securely on one chain. Now you got to deal with the complexities of two different blockchains. Then you got to reason about the economic aspect of the bridge. Right? If you build insurance, like what asset are you going to use as collateral? What actually doesn't make sense? What's secure? And then you got to reason about security assumptions of an entire system that in itself might interact with other things, right? So you're deploying in a very hostile environment, and you might have things where people try to bribe, even have to assume that some people might bribe miners to try to break a bridge at the point where it becomes reasonable for them to do so, or profitable enough for them to do so. Those are kind of a teaser on the open problems. If you want to look into these problems, which I think is very worthwhile, I think you can look at it from both sides, from technical security and economic security side of things. So if you're more on the engineering side of the world, there's like technical verification of CrossChain protocols, Polkadot's XAM, Cosmos IBC, or other independent designs are great starting points. And you can look at relay implementations, which I think all of these components, like the basic protocols and relays, that's a good starting point. If you're more into the business and economic side of things, like you can research how collateral can be used safely. You can model dependencies between connected systems with like value at risk models. So what happens if we use a collateral in the system? What are the assumptions that we have to make about exchange liquidity so we can actually arbitrage and liquidate? And that obviously goes further into agent-based modeling that you can do and see under which assumptions actually security of bridges hold up. I listed a bunch of starting points here. I'll share the slide deck afterwards. So these are just things that I would recommend getting a read on. And as the very last point, I just want to kind of lay out where we are coming from, what we are doing. So we, Interlay as a company, we are building a insured Bitcoin bridge, the first one. That's currently being done with a completely open set of custodians. Our main product is called IntroBTC, and we have a canary network called Kintsugi. We're basically building like a multi-collateral DAI version of wrapped Bitcoin assets, and you can find more on our website if you're interested. We're also hiring right now. And yeah, that concludes my tournament presentation. As mentioned at the beginning, those are my contact details. Very much looking forward to any kind of questions you might have. And thanks, everyone.